Hey there, welcome to episode 104 of the Social Business Engine podcast, the podcast where I invite thought leaders from all industries to share their real-world expertise on social and digital communications best practices. I'm Bernie Borges from Find the Convert and your host of the Social Business Engine podcast. On today's episode, you're going to meet Beverly Jackson. Beverly is Vice President, Social Media and Content Strategy at MGM Resorts International. Beverly is a social business executive extraordinaire. Her career achievements include contributing to consistent double-digit growth of the Grammy Awards from 2009, including record-breaking broadcast, digital, and social engagement numbers for the 54th Grammy Awards in February 2012. Now, in her current role, Beverly leads a high-performance entertainment and digital content marketing team at MGM Resorts International, forging long-term strategic relationships that drive revenue. And on this episode, we are going to unpack how Beverly leads this social business strategy at MGM International. Now, this episode is sponsored by our very own Social Business Workshop for Business Development. This online workshop is delivered in both group and one-on-one coaching sessions. It's designed for business development professionals who want to use social media channels to improve their results. This workshop has proved that while training improves results, coaching guarantees it. To learn more about our Social Business Development Workshop, visit socialbusinessenGine.com/workshops. And now, here's my interview with Beverly Jackson, Vice President, Social Media and Content Strategy at MGM Resorts International. Beverly, welcome to the Social Business Engine podcast.
Well, thank you, Bernie. I'm pleased to be here. Thank you very much.
Well, my pleasure. Hey, Beverly, you and I met in Las Vegas when I was there for the Social Media Strategy Summit, and I had the pleasure and the enjoyment of emceeing that event, and I had the pleasure of introducing you as one of the keynote speakers. And so I was really inspired by your presentation and invited you, and thank you so much for coming on the show today to share the MGM Resorts International story. And where I'd like to begin is with a little bit of the obvious, and that is, I know I learned a lot about MGM Resorts International when you gave your presentation. So why don't we begin with you kind of explaining the breadth of the organization?
Well, sure, exactly. Thank you. I think when most people think of MGM Resorts, or when I say that I work at MGM Resorts, the first thought is the big green building on the corner in Las Vegas with the big lion in front of it. And while that is perhaps the crown jewel in the enterprise, the breadth of the MGM Resorts network goes far deeper than that. In Las Vegas, for example, we own about 15 resorts. And if you start down on the strip at Mandalay Bay and Delano, which is where we call the beginning of the strip, if you start there and move north, you go into the Luxor, the Excalibur, Bellagio, Mandalay Bay, Mirage, Monte Carlo, New York. And so we have about 17 resorts total, some 41,000 guest rooms, which are generally at about 95% occupancy throughout the year. We have a loyalty marketing program, which includes some 26 million people. 70% of our revenue actually comes from non-gaming, with only 30% of the revenue making up gaming revenue. So the enterprise has changed as Vegas has evolved and as sort of the business model has evolved. And so without question, MGM Resorts International is the leader in that space. We have resorts in Mississippi, at the Delta, and then again down on the coast, down near Biloxi, as well as a resort in Detroit. And we are in the process of building two great new resorts, one in the D.C. area, MGM National Harbor. It is scheduled to open later this year in November, December, as well as a resort that we're opening, MGM Springfield, just outside of Boston in 2017. So in addition to the holdings in China and Macau, it is quite a large enterprise for gaming, hospitality, entertainment, and far more than just the green building on the Strip.
Well, Beverly, you just reminded me of just exactly the reaction that I had when I heard you present that from the stage at Social Media Strategy Summit. And I'm sure I have listeners right now who are likewise saying something like, wow, I never knew that MGM Resorts was that vast of an entertainment empire. And the fact that you said more than 70% of your revenue comes from non-gaming activities?
That's exactly right. So when you think about the resorts, we have some 400 plus restaurants, bars, and nightclubs. And so as entertainment in Las Vegas has taken front and center, it has become important that we think about the business in that regard as well. And so you can see the challenges for me as a digital social marketer and as a content creator, that becomes quite challenging. In addition to that, later this spring, we'll be opening the arena, the T-Mobile Arena, that is a partnership between it's a partnership between MGM Resorts International and AEG, which will hold some 18,000 seats. We hope that it will one day house a National Hockey League team, but for the most part, it will bring A-list world-class talent to Las Vegas in that big stadium environment where entertainment in a very technologically advanced environment takes front and center stage. So we're excited about that.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, so let's get to, in your title, you're vice president of both social and content. Of course, the two go together. So the first place I'd like to start in our discussion, Beverly, is with all these brands that you're managing, 17 plus properties and brands, how do you develop an overarching content strategy that spans across all those brands?
Well, I think the first thing that we've done is we're working on developing a brand for MGM Resorts International, because the individual brands span some 50 years. So when you think about Circus is one of our properties. Circus opened in 1963. It's an iconic part of the Strip. Mm-hmm. And so it has a tone and a voice. But then you think about some of the five diamond hotels and resorts that we run, like Bellagio, which has the iconic fountains in front. And you think about places like MGM Grand, of course. And so we recognize that those brands have their own voice and their own tone, and so we respect that. So we lean into that. We don't walk away from that. It has a very specific and distinct voice, and we develop content around that. But one of the things that we're working on right now, and is a big part of my day-to-day challenge, is actually tying the brands together so that they are a part of the umbrella organization, and so that people recognize and guests recognize that an experience that they're having at one, to some degree, that experience can, while it may not be replicated, it can be enhanced or amplified by expanding their exposure to another resort or to another MGM Resorts experience. And so the content strategy is really around two things. It is making sure that people understand the connectedness between our properties, our resorts, and our brands. And then making sure that we lean into the individual voices with specific tone, with a unique tone and cadence for that particular brand. And that becomes a challenge when we're launching brand new brands, like we're launching the first park on the Strip. We're opening the first park on the Strip in about 6 to 8 weeks. And it's an outdoor experience, and it's designed to be this sort of respite in an urban oasis. So that has to have its own new voice that's completely unique. And it has a content cadence and a content strategy that's unique to just that property.
Yeah, okay. I can't wait to see that. I'm sure there's going to be lots of great content around that. So what I'd like to now talk about is how you're organized to develop this, because as vice president, clearly you're in a leadership role. There's no way, you can be doing this yourself, of course. So can you talk a little bit about the organizational structure? And, we don't need to get into, how many people and like a lot of specifics, but structurally, how are you organized to actually develop all this content, distribute this content, the engagement that takes place, et cetera?
So exactly. I think one of the things that's really exciting about this, Bernie, for me, is that I'm in a really unique position. my role was created by our CXO, our Chief Experience Officer, and blessed and fully supported by our C-suite, our chairman, as well as our COO. And so from the top down, we've got a lot of support. And then the other thing that's amazing about this opportunity and this experience and what we're working on is that we have sort of broken down the silos that exist between guest strategy and brand marketing. I live in the brand marketing vertical, if you will, but between public relations and partnership marketing, loyalty marketing, and then our marketing technology group. So the silos between those groups have all been broken down so that we work very collaboratively together. But then when you look at sort of in a micro experience of where my organization exists, what you'll find is that we work very much like an internal agency to support the organization. So when you think that we're 63,000 plus employees, and we've got some, 41,000 plus guest rooms, and in multiple nights there's something going on, there are multiple things going on in any one given hour in Las Vegas and at any one of our properties and resorts. One of the things that you realize is that we have to be set up to be very nimble and respond in real time. And so whether it's a UFC fight that's happening at a property or an A-list talent that's coming to premiere a concert, we have a couple of things inside of that internal organization which allow us to be successful. And that looks a little bit like this. So there are about 70 to 75 creatives that are everything from Emmy award-winning videographers and photographers to copywriters, graphic artists, graphic designers, and that group, editors and full-on edit bays, 3D animators, creators in that sort of a vein. And those people sit right next to us. We share the same workspace. And so that team is able to work very closely with my team of 28 plus. And so on my side, I've got directors and marketers, but the most important part is that I've got strategists that spend their time in the field, and that means they're at a resort, they're at a concert, they're at a seminar, they're at a conference. Because we're a conference organization as well. We host a number of conferences from around the world. So they're actually in the field at those events, actually gathering content.
Okay.
And we're able to bring that content back into our center of excellence, if you will, and work with our account teams. So we've got brand marketers in that team, and we've got creative. But that's all happening with the property management teams, at the internal teams, and then with our partners, whether those partners are actually other corporations or they're entertainers themselves. And so that all happens very seamlessly in real time.
Okay.
And we're editing that. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a pretty robust infrastructure of people. I mean, just 70 plus creatives. That's awesome. So here's what I'm thinking now, Beverly. Speaking as an audience of one, me, I've been to Vegas, I think 5 times. And in my case, it's always been on business. I've never been to Vegas on a vacation, on a pleasure trip. So automatically that makes me a business traveler. So how do you segment audiences and engage with the various audiences? Because as you know, there's a lot of business travelers that go to Vegas. There's also a lot of vacationers that go to Vegas. How do you deal with that?
Well, so I think you've said it yourself. You've been to Vegas in the last couple of years 5 times maybe, and you've always come in business. And so now you start to understand that 70% non-gaming number. Because when you come to Vegas, there are a couple things that you absolutely need if you're here on business, whether it's business or pleasure. You need a lovely place to stay that's safe, that's state-of-the-art, that is comfortable, that meets all of your needs. And so whether you're staying at some place like Aria, which is sort of our technology hotel, where there's lots of technology there, and it's designed for the ultimate business technology traveler. And, you've got in-room ordering, and you've got mobile check-in, and you've got tablets there and about, and you've got Wi-Fi at all the properties. So that's one of the ways that we talk about the property and we separate it out. We talk about the properties and separate out content. Is we talk to business travelers in a sense that they want to be spoken to. And so as a business traveler, you're looking for places to have business dinners. You're looking for places to eat. You don't want your schedule disrupted, so you want to be able to go to the gym. You want access to resources that make it easier for you to transact business. And so we have those conversations. And so one of the things, very simple, very low touch very, very simple, is that my team has a schedule of every conference that comes into town, whether it's 10 people or 30,000 people. And we deploy our content designed to address. We use messaging and keywords and hashtags, and we optimize our content for those audiences specifically in anticipation of their arrival.
Wow, that's very cool. And so how are you handling that on the vacation side? Because obviously people come in as individuals, as vacationers, as opposed to conference attendees.
And so that's the other important part. And so, the mission statement that we work from at MGM Resorts from a marketing side, in an experience side. So you'll hear, you may have noticed at the top that I said this is led all by our Chief Experience Officer.
Yep.
And so she's not
Duly
the CMO.
noted.
Yeah, she's our Chief Experience Officer. And her job is to help us, is to lead us in terms of telling the experience story for our audiences. And that's whether it's a business audience or a vacationer or someone here on a casual basis. And so when you think about it, we have so many experiences. And all of that is designed to inspire, engage, and entertain the guests while they're here. And so we think about it in that way. And so she starts by telling us every day and in every meeting that entertainment is a fundamental human need. And if we start there, imagine the success that we have with creating really compelling narratives that are designed to inspire, engage, and entertain when you start with entertainment as a fundamental human need. And whether you're at Circus and you're under the Big Top and you're watching the aerialist, or you're at Lago having lunch, looking out onto the fountain with an amazing Frank Sinatra soundtrack. Or you could be at Delano at Skyfall looking out onto the city with this amazing 90-degree view of the skyline, and the lights come on. And so whatever that experience is, we tell those experiences that are designed to inspire, delight, and entertain. And we focus for the consumer that's coming here to forget their troubles and to escape or to enjoy a cabana and a refreshing cocktail and then take in a show. Entertainment is a fundamental human need, and we work with it. We start there and we work down that chain.
Beverly, I'm pulling up my calendar now to see when I have my next conference in Las Vegas, because you're making me very eager to get there again. You're reminding me of so many of those experiences. And
Bernie, we've got great entertainment for you. Come on down.
I know you do. All right. So, Beverly, this is the Social Business Engine podcast. So can we talk a little bit about any business stories that you have as it relates to content and social, just anything that you're able to share in terms of a story where maybe it was a campaign or an experiment or something, and there was a business outcome that you can share with my listeners?
So sure. There's so many, but the one that comes to mind, which was recent this year, is I think about, we started the year. So I should just back up and say that prior to mid-2015, each of the properties existed individually. So they had a social person at each property. And whether that was a full person or two people or a half a body, attributed to social as a business channel or the marketing channel, that's how it was set up.
Okay.
In mid-2015, our team changed. And so I came on board, and the idea was that we would centralize social and content creation and content distribution. And we created the Social Media Content Strategy Center of Excellence.
Okay.
And by doing that, a couple of things have happened. We now operate as an enterprise. So when I talk about the scale of what our enterprise is, it's easy to see that we are better when we operate holistically than we are when we operate individually. And so several campaigns that we've worked on over the last couple of months sort of step into that as a reality for us as a business. So I think about in the past, we have a spring offer going on right now. And so if you follow any of our channels on social, or you've engaged in any travel sites, you've probably seen our Gotta Vegas, hashtag Gotta Vegas promotions, where we actually talk about sort of the deals that you can get at your favorite hotel. And so maybe you've always wanted to stay at Bellagio, but the price was just out of your reach because it's aspirational luxury, if you will. And so for the first time now, you may have been a guest at Mirage or a guest at Monte Carlo, and because you now have access to the discounted rates through the enterprise, you can now maybe afford to stay at Bellagio and have a different kind of Vegas experience. And so that's one example, because what that allows us to do is to spend our resources more efficiently. The other thing I think is a really good example of this is much more tangible. So that's pretty 35,000 foot level of experience. So here's something much more tangible. For the first time last year, at the end of the year, we decided to look back on the year and look across the enterprise to see what was worth celebrating. So everybody does sort of a recap end-of-year campaign. And so what we did was we did an amazing content campaign where we said to our content creators, I want you to recap for people just how crazy and amazing this year has been. And so that went from everything to all the music festivals where 40,000 people came out we have music festival grounds. So we hold things like Rock in Rio and the iHeart Music Festival and, other country music festivals that we have throughout the year. We had the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight at MGM Grand Garden Arena. We broke ground for the new T-Mobile Arena. So we captured all of that content in a series that we call Look Back 15. And every other day or so, we would just release these amazing pieces of content, whether it was the team at Monte Carlo trying to break the world's largest sake bomb contest and not making it, but agreeing to come back next year and do it. Or it was the first ever Kabuki live theater on the Bellagio Lake with the fountains as the backdrop. So we did all of that content. We rolled it out into the year. And then we ended the year by displaying the Snapchat logo on the front of the iconic pyramid for Luxor. And so we invited guests to share their New Year's Eve experiences by checking into our resort and using our unique New Year's Eve filters and engaging with this giant Snapchat ghost on the side of the pyramid. And then we carried that experience from outside of 2015. We rode the wave of that excitement on social. This was all on social and all around content that was created. We rode that right into CES. So imagine you come right out of New Year's Eve, which, Vegas New Year's Eve is second probably to Times Square. We rode that wave right into CES, where 140,000 tech thought leaders show up in town and all want to understand why there's a Snapchat logo on the top of the Luxor. Right. And so they created this whole content media storm that was all UGC driven by some of the most influential business people in tech.
Wow.
And we followed that with an amazing Snapchat influencer story. So when you think about CES being one audience demographic, that business audience where people brought their spouses to enjoy the city and have sort of a vacation along with CES. And then we ended the CES experience by bringing in 4 of the most incredible and well-known Snapchat artists, Snapchat influencers, and we had an amazing Snapchat influencer party at Luxor where we created a series of Snapchat stories about how to find the keys to the party to be open. And so people who weren't in Vegas were following that story and who may not have come for CES to see the Snapchat logo, but who were here for New Year's Eve, they were able to pick up on that thread. And so it's like this idea of creating content that took all of 2015, wrapped it up into a bow for New Year's Eve, capitalized on CES, and then ended the CES experience by talking about Snapchat.
Wow. So before I segue to my recap of everything, I just want to inspire you, as if you need the inspiration, Beverly. Like, how are you going to top that in 2016?
Well, Bernie, don't worry. I've got some things up my sleeve. Just stay tuned.
Okay, so here's my ask then. You have to come back in a year, February or March of 2017, for a repeat. And we'll take a look at what you did in 2016. How's that?
I like that idea. So we'll talk about some really cool things that are going to happen, but I'm going to challenge you to stay tuned this year and keep your eyes open and listen for all the cool stuff that's going to happen, from a new resort opening to a new arena and some really cool things that we haven't yet announced, including, the first urban park, the first park in the middle of the Strip. So we'll have a ton of stuff to talk about and a ton of stuff for you to watch.
Challenge accepted. Challenge accepted, Beverly. Well, here we are now at the point where I attempt, and I say attempt very purposefully, to recap kind of the highlights that we discussed here in our 25 or so minutes of this podcast. So at the end of my recap, I'm going to ask you to elaborate or fill in any holes or correct anything, just so that we can leave my listeners with a nice little recap of this whole conversation. And we began this conversation, Beverly, with an overview of MGM Resorts International. And as you pointed out, it's way more than that big green building on the Las Vegas Strip. It really stems from the whole corporation, stems from the premise that entertainment is a fundamental human need. And you've got 17 resorts on the Strip. You've got 41,000 guest rooms, more than 60,000 employees. You've got new venues that are opening up in D.C. and one outside of Boston. And you mentioned that more than 70% of your revenue is from non-gaming activities, which is amazing. And then you've got new venues coming up in addition to the one I just mentioned, like the arena, the park that you mentioned. I can't wait to see that one. As we started talking about your content strategy, you said that it really starts with the brand, the overall brand for MGM International. But each individual brand, and there's roughly 20 or so, has its own unique tone and voice, and that you have two objectives. One is to tie all the brands together so that consumers understand that each brand is part of the bigger MGM brand, and that you also, like what you said, lean into the voice of each individual brand so that they also have a unique element to them. We talked a little bit about your organization structure. It sounds very robust. Your role, you mentioned your role was created by the Chief Experience Officer, so very top-down support. You mentioned, you explained that you've broken down the silos between the neighboring departments in marketing and public relations and that sort of thing, and that you function as sort of like an internal agency, and that you realize that you work better when you work holistically. You also said that you're nimble, that you've got to react because, let's face it, Vegas doesn't sleep, right? It's 24/7, 365. So you've got an infrastructure that allows you to be very nimble, very responsive. You've got more than 70 creatives that attend activities and events that are going on in the field. And then you take your content and you kind of pull it through to what you call the social media and content center of excellence. And that's where you kind of make it all happen and get distributed out through the social channels. We talked a little bit about audience segmentation and how they generally fall into two categories. There's people like me, the business traveler, who really needs to come back for pleasure and non-business. But when I'm there, you know that I'm there, whether it's a small conference or a big conference, and then you gear the content and the messaging to my needs as a business traveler. And then likewise, you're always telling the experience story, which is something that reaches the consumer as well. And that's all about inspiring, delighting, and entertaining the guest, whether it's a business traveler or a vacationer. We talked a little bit about a couple of stories, a couple of examples that you've achieved. One is something that I think you said is ongoing right now, and that's the #Gotta Vegas campaign that allows someone to perhaps use an enterprise level discount to stay someplace that may have been previously out of reach for them. But the real story that was really, really interesting is how you did a recap of all of 2015. You called it the Look Back 15 content campaign, and how you released that content over time. And you did that toward the end of the year, if I understood correctly, Beverly. But then you also fed it right into the new year, January, and took it right into CES, the Consumer Electronics Show that happens every January in Las Vegas with 140,000 technology people, and you capped it off with either a contest or a campaign. I don't know, maybe you can elaborate on the Snapchat. We had 4 highly influential, high-profile Snapchat users, and how you capped it off with a campaign or contest with them, and that really, really capped off that look back on 2015, brought it into 2016, and probably gave you some great ideas for what you're going to do for 2016. So that's my recap. Feel free to elaborate or fill in any holes.
Well, Bernie, that is a great recap. I think you could have just done this without me. That's perfect.
No way.
I would say the one thing that's sort of interesting, just to clarify on the Snapchat piece, is that what we did was we work with influencers a lot in Las Vegas, because as you can imagine, making sure that you're connected to the tastemakers and those who are on trend are very important. And so we just identified 4 people who were out there telling amazing Snapchat stories. And we were very lucky to get 4 people who are actually nominated for Shorty Awards this year as the best Snapchatters of the year. And so that turned into just this big party and experience where we were just sharing content. So it was just an opportunity to share content in a new platform, or across a new platform, or a relatively new platform, with an audience that may not think about our enterprise that way. And so, you made the point about targeting our audience and making sure that we're speaking to all of our consumers. And so people from Vegas from 21 to 81 are in Vegas regularly. And so we want to make sure that we are using the right channels to speak to that particular audience in a way that they'll understand it. And so what we didn't talk about was Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or anything specific like that, because I don't think that that's the point. I think the point is, for us, we tell the right story with the right content at the right time on the right channel.
I couldn't have said it better. And like you said, it's not about a specific platform. It's telling the right story at the right time, at the right channel for the specific audience that you're reaching. So love it. Fantastic. Well, Beverly, where would you like to send my listeners online to get to know more about you or the MGM Resorts International brand?
Well, that's easy. So you can always go to mgmresorts.com. It's easy to find, and you'll find all of our resorts there and all of our experiences. Or you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat, at MGM Resorts INTL. So that's MGM Resorts INTL on any of your favorite channels, and you'll find out everything you need to know about having an amazing, incredible experience here in Vegas.
I'm sure we will. Well, thank you. Well, Beverly, thank you so much for hopping on here today, and for my listeners who, of course, are listening to this after we record this. Today is your birthday, so happy birthday on our recording day. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you so much for sharing the MGM International Resorts story on the Social Business Engine podcast.
Thank you, Bernie.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed my conversation with Beverly Jackson, Vice President of Social Media and Content Strategy at MGM Resorts International. This episode, once again, is sponsored by our very own Social Business Workshop for Business Development. This online workshop is delivered in both group and one-on-one coaching sessions. It's designed for business development professionals who want to use social media channels to improve their sales results. This workshop has proved that while training improves results, coaching is what guarantees it. So to learn more about our Social Business Workshop for Business Development, visit our website, socialbusinessengine.com/workshops. Hey, are you subscribed by email to get our weekly podcast updates that we send every Friday? If not, just visit our subscribe page at our website, socialbusinessengine.com. And whether you're a regular listener to this podcast or a first-time listener, thank you. I really appreciate your time. I hope you got actionable insights on this episode with Beverly, and I hope that you'll push that subscribe button on your podcast player so that you get each of our weekly episodes downloaded auto-magically to your podcast player. And I'd really appreciate it if you would write a review in iTunes and share your sentiments about this podcast so that others might discover the Social Business Engine podcast. We have a direct link from our website to iTunes. Just go to socialbusinessengine.com/iTunes. And lastly, I invite you to engage with me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is my full name, @BernieBorges. And this podcast is also on Twitter as well as on Instagram with the handle @SBEngine. And we're on Facebook, appropriately facebook.com/social business engine. And of course, follow our hashtag SBE Show. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. I want to thank my guest once again, Beverly Jackson, Vice President of Social Media and Content Strategy at MGM Resorts International. This is Bernie Borges of Find and Convert, wishing you continued success on your social business journey.